And we are live. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Shawky Diwan, who's our guest this
Um,
evening. This is
Scott, how are you doing, brother?
good. And this is Scott Harney from Esoteric Guides, New York, and also the show called Dreamscape Mysteries, Esoterica, and the Liminal Path. And in Dreamscape, we take a look at spirituality, but also spirituality through the lens of herbalism and the use of herbs to enhance consciousness. And tonight's topic is going to be Middle East entheogens and the path of the Hashisheen. And Shoi is really a pioneer in bringing back Islamic practical sorcery. Like for many years, it was hidden, and Shoi has a order and a teaching school, Order of the Hashisheen, and he has a website, sufisorcery.com. And he's been really, I would say, one of the most dynamic teachers on the planet now, bringing back this wisdom. So welcome, Shoki.
Thank you. I'm humbled, brother. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you. And I noticed that the when people think of El Hashisheen, they think of Marco Polo stories of the El Hashisheen, the Nizari Ismailis in the
Mhm.
Middle Ages, Hassan Isabah, the old man of the mountain, and the sort of, what would you say, esoteric sect of Ismailis who used Hashisheen as a sacrament, and they also controlled large portions of Persia and as well as parts of Syria. And one may say, really part of the golden age of Islamic sorcery and mysticism. So, what is the connection between your order and the Ismailis of the past and this order of the Hashisheen?
Okay. A very good question. First, thanks for having me and giving me a chance to talk with you tonight. First, the definition sorcery for Arabic metaphysics is a missing label, meaning there is nothing such as sorcery. There's sihr, and the same practice that is available in sihr or magic could be also viewed in something else called hikmah.
Hmm. Which is wisdom.
One forbidden, one
Mm-hmm.
is actually high application of wisdom. So the need to put some designations and collect these practices, we present it as sorcery.
Hmm.
So that's otherwise we would have called it hikmah, but to really gauge the connection with the Hashashin order, as you mentioned. First, the order historically is known for its political activism. Everybody, there's video games, the assassins. However, within the narrative of the order itself, historically, there's only one uh, part of it that was actively engaged in political narratives. The majority was really directed to inner, as you mentioned, esoteric or batini teachings from the Islamic lens and with the viewpoint of the original craft that is in all teachings.
Right.
The reason,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I might say a lot of Sufi teachers that I also have talked to consider the Ismailis hold the secret to esoteric Islam. Like they still retain that.
well, in our opinion, that Al Hashashin have accessed the inner shadow to a level that is unequaled in any esoteric knowledge prior or
Mm-hmm.
since. And that brings me to answer your first question. The reason the connection with Al Hashashin is that it is the closest incarnate power hub that assimilated the original craft within the given terminology of its Sufic or its inner esoteric
Mm-hmm.
terminology. So for that, we are associated with that hub as such, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, their inner teachings and writings um, are unequal in accessing the shadow and viewing the cosmos and knowledge as one coming from one source and utilizing whatever means in accessing that is also pretty laid out and formulated.
And one of the means they used was hashish. That was one of the sacraments, correct?
Absolutely. So hashish is, of course, as you know, hashish, hash. Al
Right.
Hashisheen, which we know now as assassins, really, we call the order members Asasiyun.
Mm,
Asasi is a constant factor in the
mm,
unfoldment of non karmic metaphysics.
right.
So we take the position metaphysically of having our perceptual mirror reflect those inner realities.
Right. And explain how the use. Well, hashish is a purified substance made from marijuana. For those don't know it, and hashish is not prevalent as it was in the '60s. How does hashish assist in the spiritual path, and how is it
Well,
used ritually?
that's a very good question. The sacrament, we talk about also in the Arabic and pre Islamic metaphysics and technologies, spiritual technologies of handling perception. We talk about something called the Abd al Nur, or I would translate it as the little light,
Little light.
is sacramental, psychoactive uh, sacrament that you take to actually access even the Congress of Salat.
Right.
So a good sect would be a good example for that is a Nusayriya. And I believe they use some form of grain distilled alcohol in their sacrament. And for Al Hashashin, hashish is the main ally, herbal ally, and we learn how to work with it by holding it in certain energetic parts in our body.
And so you would do this in a ceremony, correct?
There is a few rites that use hashish. One of them, yes, in a setting of we call it jalsat hashish, when we come and we sit together and it's partaken within a sacramental formats. So there is one of them that way. There is other uses in our Mendel work, which is for people who are listening, sort of a black scrying device,
Right.
more fine to our workings. But hashish also is used as one of those entheogens. And excuse my English, I know I tried to learn how to say this for our talk, but
Sure.
that's the best I can do.
It's
So,
now in esoteric Islam, El Khidr, who's a very a saint of Islam and actually famous, famous is in the Quran, and also he's the subject of a movie by Bruce Lee was in, which was interesting.
interesting. What is it
Yeah.
called?
Oh, let me think about it. But it was actually based on the Khidr story.
Oh,
I think of the magic flute. I think that's what it was. But
okay.
so talking to a lot of the Sufis in Pakistan, and Khidr, he is the sort of patron saint of hashish. They call it chars in Pakistan, which I
Hmm.
found very interesting because he's the green man, and of course, the green man in the West, really, and that's something we're going to get to, is the role that Islam has played in Western occultism. But we'll get to that a bit later. Ayahuasca,
Hmm.
huge now. I would say even trendy. A lot of people say it saved their lives. A lot of them, I know in Brooklyn there are ayahuasca circles,
Hmm.
and a lot of New Yorkers go to Peru. I was friends with one New Yorker who had terminal cancer, had an ayahuasca trip, which, as people know, it's the vine of the Banisteropsis capi and the chacruna plant, and it's mixed together in a ceremony. And DMT is in the chacruna plant, and what it does is it puts you in contact with the other world. But the Middle East has its own ayahuasca as well. And now there was an article this week in The Guardian. Moses saw God because he was stoned. And this Israeli academic claims that that Moses actually was taking this ayahuasca, which is essentially Syrian rue, which takes the role of the vine in the bark of the acacia tree, which is the chacruna plant. The same as you were saying, the Syrian rue inhibits the enzymes that destroys DMT, and the acacia bark actually is the DMT. So did you ought to use that type of ayahuasca that's been used in the past?
Well, as the order of Hashisheen, we are proficient in distilling psychoactives in ritualistic use over history.
Mm-hmm.
The modern tendency to associate the Sufi order with just one area of practice is not quite accurate, meaning to say a plant doesn't grow here and Sufism ends in the Middle East, leaving alone what happens with the Sufis from India and the Far East.
Right.
So the distillment of the sacrament is central to learn how to, no different than the traditional witchcraft, which is the witch's ornament, right? However, for us, it has to be something real, not subjective. Meaning, I get some cream put in my hand and close my eyes and say it's a sacrament. It has to be a psychoactive sacrament to move the perception into the psychedelic space, and that's a precursor to the work. Meaning, it's not central. It's central as setting up, but it's not necessary. Meaning, you describe Moses as the guy was high. We don't dispute the idea that his level of perceptual activity was in what we describe today as a hyper space or as a hyper psychoactive space. However, we dispute the fact that he needed an actual sacrament. Yes, he might have utilized this when he learned from Shu'aib, because he left Egypt, and he learned for years and he came back. And he learned a lot. And when he came back, this is when he did the sorceric acts of confronting the Pharaoh and the other magicians. So, however, as we learn from our experience, we see that the movement of the regular attention to a psychedelic space, a structured ceremonial space, is necessary in force twice in a human's life, at max. Yes, you can use it a lot. However, if it's done proficiently within a structured system, you should be able to replicate and build on the first movement of your attention to utilize other access points. So maybe, in other words, Moses was in a psychedelic space, but maybe that is the God space as well, and we glimpse at through the Entheogen, which we take as a sacrament in form of hashish, and our other thing that you mentioned as our way of dealing with divine of the dead as a very powerful spirit and sacrament.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting how this knowledge is coming out now. There's a lot of scholars who are now refuting even the common, I think, academic view that, for instance, Soma in India was the Amanita muscaria mushroom. In fact, I think it was R. Gordon Wasson wrote the book Soma, the Divine Mushroom. And for years, people thought, oh, this must be what the early Christians were taking. But it turns out it was this sort of native, native mix that did give them access to hyper reality and different planes of existence. You were saying something that was really interesting, how the Sufi will take what is in the land, right?
Absolutely. Axiom, the main idea is a Sufi ibn waqtu. A Sufi is son of his own time. In our understanding and system, when you go to a land, one of the first thing we need to do is called ihsa al-asma, or literally, to say it lightly, is cataloging the names. Meaning, I'm in a land now that worships somebody on a cross, or a Buddha, or a figure I'm not familiar with. My practice and engagement in that time in the new land is to understand what image, what real emanation of the 99 plus 1 emanation is this image resting on. Once I make that connection. As such, we have to be connected to the direct land and timeline we're in. We have to be, it's a living tradition. I have to use the plants in my, around my land. I have to connect with that. As such, even the formulas of doing bukhur and magical fumes, ruhaniya, which is senses, we also call on what's in the land. So if my sphere of perception today have Hecate, have Lilith, have the vine of the dead, if I'm going and sitting in a little box and saying some names of some gods, Arabic or Hindu or whatever the hell they are, then I'm not connecting with the actual karmic unfoldment of these realities in the multiple images. So we need to utilize the sacraments of the land, the images of the land, and the herbs and the spirits of where we are, our time specifically.
Right. And just for people that don't know, when you mention the 99 plus 1 names, that's the 99 names of Allah. And that's sort of the framework that you can put a lot of these different deities into. For instance, Hecate in your system, in the system. So your system actually goes back to the primordial energy of a lot of these deities.
It is
the
primordial craft. Nothing we're claiming.
Where? In the bag? Here.
I'm on camera right now. It's upstairs. Asi's son. Sorry. Anyway.
No, good.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay.
So,
but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good, brother. So I was saying we were talking about the Hecate and the names, I believe, right?
Right. Yes.
And I was explaining that the names are the primordial craft. Going back to that point, the Islamic narrative, when it came after the Old Testament and the New Testament, claimed something very peculiar for the learned and the theologians of that time, that it claimed not to be a new religion, really. It said this is the original covenant.
Right.
And that's the story of Adam and the timeline before. And here's the narrative. The unfoldment within the testaments within time came very separate from that. Came the Old, the New, and then the final testament or the Quran. So as such, when we look at the story of Adam or Jesus or whatever story you want to put on it, even chthonic and pre-human incarnational narratives or alien narrative to our perception, it still does fall in the idea that there is an original covenant. There is an original craft, which we claim as every other Sufi, that we are resting on the original craft, utilizing the terminology and the skill of assembling perceptual lenses throughout history.
Right.
Not having, if it doesn't say Allah, then it's not Sufism, as the academic would look in his books and say. It is the capacity of assembling a perceptual mirror within your given timeline that will inherit the original craft despite the terminology of its manifestation. And the system is very clear and laid out in how that is done.
It's interesting. Literally, you can work with any spirited deity. You mentioned how the Sufis in India work with Kali, even though they're Muslim, and they work with Kali as a jinn, and that's how they
Very
understand
powerful
Kali.
jinn queen, of course.
Right.
Different than any of the gods you hear about in all the crafts. Very powerful jinns. However, for Sufis, sometimes we like to even deal not with the spirit itself, but with the true name that is beyond its image.
Right.
So I describe it as looking at a cup of lemonade and seeing lime, water, and sugar, and dealing with the connection with the forming energy. To
Right.
rest the attention at some time of progress. And I'm hoping I'm not kind of pushing the conversation out of where we should
No,
be.
no, it's fascinating. I mean, this is part of it. The whole concept of actually going back to the primordial energy of some of these deities, I think, is fascinating.
Absolutely.
So,
So
and
in our
it's
Kate, we work with the junction point of transaction, intersection of three major names. And
right.
that is Hecate. And then you can build an altar for Hecate and deal with the effigy and the image, knowing that there is a name emanating despite the changing image over history and time.
Right. So there could be people who are in touch. Well, I mean, um, yeah, I mean, for instance, like Hecate. What would the original name be?
Heka, you mean the you mean
The
the
original energy,
line
right?
is al-maqdira.
El
Al-maqdira is
Maqdira.
the source of the feminine point in the name al-qadir. And if we see one of our videos on the subject, we talk about that everything in the universe have a penetrating perceptual point, a point within it that receive the emanation. That point in nature is feminine. So if the name Al-Qadir, the capable, the
Right.
capability of anything in the cosmos, the point in it that receives the emanation is the feminine point Al-Maqdira, and that is really the seat of the junction point of Haykam, which we say God's fear, right? The
Right.
ancient Egyptians say God fears Haykam, right? And
Right.
in the Sufi, we say Allah yakhsha al-maqdira. What does that mean? That God fears his own capability of doing things. So there is
Right.
a lot, I think, on one of the videos on that too.
Tell me a bit about the curriculum now. Now you have opened up the school, Sufi Sorcery School, and you have different levels. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the curriculum for people who may be interested. And I'm going to put the website in the chat.
Yes, thank you. You can put either one too.
Sufi Sorcery. Yeah, and actually, let me see if I can actually share that as well. One second.
Thank you.
Here we go. Chrome tab. Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about
Yeah.
the
So
curriculum.
when we examined the current status of metaphysics and magic, it really fell in the realm, unfortunately, of hobbying and intellectual achievements. And classically and traditionally, it's always been, it's up, I think, Scott, in classes. Traditionally, it's always been there is a need for formal training of development for the faculties, metaphysical and such. So our school addresses the initiatory system in general in form of 5 or 4 curriculums, starting with cosmology, describing the Sufic cosmology, the blueprint of the cosmos, describing the names and many different modules, with workings of connecting with the Qareen, And then we move to the second curriculum, which is the sacred letters, Rouhani letters. And you see this across all the grimoires. John Dee, what we describe as Rouhani letters. Austin Osman's pair, Alphabet of Desire, is Rouhani letters. Andrew Chambly. However, the assembly of these letters reflects the assembly and dominion over Imaginarium. And that is done and distilled through lineage. So we delve into the cultivation of the shadow letters. And then we move after that to Awfaq, or Arabic gematria, a very concise branch of practical sorcery that completely in the realm of objectivity.
Right.
And after that, the final one is the jinn operation. And you can't really delve in our system, say, I just want to work with jinn without knowing how to distill squares. You can distill squares without properly assimilating letters and condensing them and so forth. So it's a very engaging thing, and I am proud to say that all the people working with us are literally heavyweights, rock stars. Nobody goes in our system without accomplishing in their own rights and cultivation. It's a demanding system, and we praise ourselves of always having to exceed our expectation with the quality of work of people who go through it. So I'm excited, honestly, to just find someone I can talk with real sorcery. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been here for over 20 years. There is nobody who can talk subjective sorcery. So eventually, when you have someone that have developed the faculties that he understand what is him, when you say, oh, spirit is talking to me, where is your imagination? Who is the inner dialogue? Had you had mastery over Imaginarium? So I'm excited to find a group of people from different walks and gauges of life who have developed their work to eventually we can sit down and work with jinn or something of sort, and it's not completely hobbying or subjective. So that is my excitement on the subject of the classes.
Yeah, and it's an amazing school, really. It's very rare to find a school like this.
Thank
now,
you. It's not
jinn, yeah, the jinn. Now, when people think of Arabic magic and Arabic sorcery, they think of the jinn. Even though your curriculum is much larger than that, but what are some of the misconceptions people have about the jinn?
First misconception I can describe to you as this: when I came to the U.S. long time ago, I wanted to drink some shay. I went to Starbucks.
Okay.
And I learned at the moment that they treat shay as something different than tea. It's like animal. So I learned that the matrix system is completely likewise, if that's too abstract. My main issue with the current understanding of jinn is that it is a subjective imaginary friend.
Right.
My jinn. That is the big thing.
Right.
Second thing is people treat it as something different than demons and different spirits they know.
Right. I mean, because we say you consider the 72 goetic, well, we'll say entities, they're all jinn, correct? Would you say? Yeah.
Of course. Let's analyze this. Let's analyze this.
Right.
The guy, Sulaiman, is a Middle Eastern.
Right.
Okay, just saying. To assume that the practice of the grimoire left from him has nothing to do. Sorry, I'm getting animated on the subject, but to assume that it has nothing to do with the Middle East is fallacy, to say the least, or again, very big error. So yes, they are definitely jinn, powerful jinn. There is mentions of that in the lore. We can even know their names, know some of their stories, what they were doing for him. He
Yeah.
made them build things for him.
Yeah.
He's not
And
like
I
get
think,
them and put them in a bottle and put them in a shelf. He
yeah.
made them work for him like nobody's business.
Hmm.
So we have a lot in the lore about that.
And even I think Dantalian, the 72nd, is even said, that he is a jinn. I mean, they self-identify in different ritual communications that,
Who is?
Dantalion
Okay.
was the 72nd, yeah. But
Yeah.
I know if you
He's,
read a lot,
uh,
he's self,
yeah.
but it's fascinating. So how is it, so in working with the jinn, so I know a lot of occultists want to do that. What is your advice to them?
My advice is to start from the beginning.
Hmm.
Meaning, first of all, you don't throw anything out. Like if you have accomplished something in your own tradition, you build on that. But you need to start for accumulating. It's a very precise. What is different in jinn magic? And what's our beef with that flimsy book that came and had some jinn sorcery affiliation on it?
Which
That
book was that?
it was some weak book that came out sometime, and we had some problem with that. It presented itself as the definite traditional
Right.
perspective in Arab sorcery, and it was disgraceful in our view. So the distinguishing factor in jinn sorcery it is not subjective, Scott. It's not, hey, I had this and next morning I felt this because I felt this in the tree and I felt that box, I found it. No, that for us is called first shadow sorcery, meaning dependent on our own imagination and
Right.
intuition. We're talking something that happened despite your imagination, intuition, and your will.
Right.
We're talking more precise, pinpointed interactions with signs of presence. Meaning, if you're
Right.
here, this is the list of signs I need to see to even not say there is only a presence. So, to establish something that real, first of all, you need to learn about the layers of your mind. So when I'm sitting now and saying I'm having a communication with, whatever, talking to me. Well, how many voices are in your mind to start with? Do you know that?
Right.
And then do you have mastery over them? And can you manipulate that? Do you understand that the jinn will utilize your own mind triangle
Right.
to communicate with you? So the realm of subjectivity is where we need to be tight to work with actual jinn. And that is my tariqah, my way of doing things, where I feel it's worth to put effort to really work with someone, is not to just give a cataloging image, but to undertake serious working that leads to real evocations and sorceric paths.
Right. And what's the spiritual benefit of working with the jinn?
They say the most precious thing for a human is their desires and their wants. So I'll leave that to everybody to answer. Some want
Right.
power, some want knowledge. It's up to everybody. Our view is the development of the qareen and the energetic double is a precursor to working with a spirit. So when you end up with a jinn, you say, hey, get me out of my body to remove you. And you don't know how to do that with your energy body, then they will use your energy.
Right.
If that answers.
Yeah, the Korean is something I think a lot of Western audiences don't understand. So maybe you could explain that is the body double. And I think one of the main focuses, at least in some of the earlier levels of your teaching, is getting in touch with this through the dream state. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the Korean and the spiritual benefit of getting in touch with the Korean. And what happens if you don't get in touch with your Korean? Because sometimes that can cause you a problem. It is just literally your astral double, right?
Not the astral double as your astral body. Not talking about, like you're saying, oh, my emotional body today is feeling that. Talking something that doesn't have a matter, yet exhibit characteristics of matter. Conscious in itself,
Mm-hmm.
yet close and double to you. It's considered al-mukhawa or عفوا al-qarin is considered a very serious operation. It's just because we are serious in our approach that we start this early on. However, this is the end means for many other orders. Having a connection with that thing that is, and as I described before, the soul and the flesh are very different.
Right.
When they wanted to come together, it was almost impossible without the intermediate, something bigger that can contain the opposites together. And that was the mithal, the substance, and the world of which each of us had the energetic double. So when we start our operation by controlled and structured dream working and mental working and zikr, that leads to a point of understanding both philosophically and energetically of dreaming that energy that a person found extra in their body and a layer of their mind. So dreaming it collectively, the 7 points that you're familiar with, that have other 7 points to them, and now you put these 7 points. The act of that structured act of the working around it brings the attention of the qarin closer to the human.
Right.
Acts as you're pulling the double within your proximity, and that is have benefits beyond what we can say. It has the assembly of both organic and inorganic circuits. So if we have organic circuits, biocircuits in our body, you know, whatnot, and we have the energy of that going on, the inorganic circuit on the double, when they both are merged together in a specific also practice, we come with what we call the macrocosmic orbit. And the benefits of that is a lot of the levels of energy, personal power, realization, and spiritual authority in your work. And again, to each one, their desire and purpose is the goal. So if someone wants it for power, that is between them and their work. However, you know, yeah, so that kind of covers a little bit.
Yeah, and I know in Pakistan, some of the Sufis there claimed that they would send their Korean out to bring them information or to, basically be their double in different places. And also, I was talking to one Sufi who claims that he actually, when he was doing the Korean work, he actually met his Korean one day in a cafe. Is that possible?
There is very various lore encounters with things like that, and they mostly don't end well in a sense. Mentioned the dangers of doing this when it's not structured is really, you're technically messing with your, how can I describe this? What is a psychotic episode? Elapse.
Yeah.
What is it? Let's define it. Is the lapse of reason, right? Lapse of reason. The failure to define what is real or not for a minute, two, or whatever, that leaves a very impactful scar of the old, but they told me that, right? The act of sorcery herein is controlled, meaning I know what I'm doing, when I'm going in, going out, and I know what I'm doing there, and I need to get back in reason. When you do the qarin work and it becomes to be objective out of yourself and takes an animation of its own, could be detrimental for the reason of man as a vessel, if it's not trained to relate with something otherworldly from other than the ego.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned at one point, it can be very jarring to your sense of reality when you realize when you dream the Korean and you start interacting at the dream level, then you realize what if the Korean is dreaming me, which is a
Uh, yes, that is a
and that could
point.
be right. I think it would be a bit disconcerting. Now, the holy guardian angel that is in Western occultism. Okay, the what is it? It's a long multi-month operation. Um, is the holy guardian angel the same as the Korean?
No.
Hmm.
First, the word qarin is the constant companion of something.
Hmm. Okay.
Uh, the human have more than one constant companion. We
Hmm.
have Raqib and Atid, right?
Hmm.
Those are two
Hmm.
angels. Those are also qarins, meaning constant companions to the human being from a
Hmm.
specific angelic race that is have its own characteristics.
Hmm.
As well, each one have a jinn or a
Hmm.
shaitan that is a constant companion to the point that that specific clan of shaitans and jinn birth equal rate to the human race. So
Hmm.
you're born with this guy is born with you, you're together. Comes to mind the
Right.
nice book of what's the guy's name who wrote it's called the Screw Tape Ladders. What's his name?
C.S. Lewis.
Very, very funny and very deep book.
Yeah. Hmm.
Nice. I liked it. So very similar to that. They have their own characteristics, and they're only profanely called qarins because
Right.
they are constant companions.
Hmm.
The true qarin that we're talking about is al-mithal, which
Mm,
is
the double.
the energetic polar reverse
Hmm.
of. I think we have a small video on it.
Mm. I'll put that in the chat. Yeah, there is a video actually.
Yes, it's not that bad the best, but it's not bad.
Yeah. Well, I'll put that in the chat in a second. But yeah, and that's fascinating. And it also is there a so what's your opinion on the holy guardian angel, the
Okay, so
conversation of with the holy guardian angel?
yes,
Is something in your order also that does this? A
no,
similar.
that is not the same as the Qarin work.
Hmm.
The idea of seeking something that comes and help us that way is viewed as unrealistic expectations,
Hmm.
meaning that you're in a realm that you can go and get a burger for free, and you
Hmm.
expect you're going to close your eye in your bedroom, and now the spirit is going to come and tell you, and it will be your guide.
Right.
Our view is more realistic to the predatorial cosmos we live in. And as
Mm.
such, everything is earned, even such simple cultivations. So the idea of exchanging the image of the classic God of please come and help me, please, I'll do this,
Mm.
with a Satan image and say, oh, I'm going to do everything, please help me do that, is still for us the same possibility. The integrity of assembling your inorganic own energetic double is
Hmm.
paramount to have a true chance at assembling a soul. So if
Right.
everybody have a ruh or a spirit, the kind of density of the soul that will retain the journey is really something that start with that kind of work. So yes, there is things that can help, absolutely, but the idea of being resting on the laurels of that something can come and help like a saint or whatever,
Hmm.
always secondary to the main formula of gaining power and taking claim to it personally, make it personal power.
Right. And of course, in the past, especially during the Greek times and Roman times, and I think Anthony Russell's in the room, he's talked about this a lot. The relationship with deity was different. It was more of a bartering and sort of a personal relationship where now we have almost in the West, it's almost like a begging, please help me. Whereas before, they would actually threaten the deity. Maybe bury the statue upside down or threaten to destroy the statue. So, but you take a different path, obviously, than that.
No,
Though it is
this
a direct gnosis.
no.
Right.
What you're talking about is remnants of actual living practices that
Right.
of what living ones, and there is some remnants of them in living practices, meaning the connection with the deity. Like we say, for instance, Allahu inni a'udhu bika mink, meaning I'm really using the evil eye to protect me from the evil eye, kind of sort.
Right.
So using the same method of poison to repel poison. But yes, we still see threatening. The deity is in the perceptual possibility of worship.
Right.
We are very clear about that meaning. The Guesha formula, for instance, is or the Solomonic formula, and it's vast image, meaning including the Arabic and the Hebrew and what we have in the English, is please God, please, hey, do this, or I'm going to call someone else to come and do something bad to you if you don't do that. In a way, with various degrees of control and binding to the spirit. For us, this still is a worship formula, meaning taklif, a right-hand formula, contingent on the plead being answered or the threat being feared of for something else to do as such. The rafa taklif, or true left-hand path, and we view all left-hand path on the market as today right-hand path formula.
Really interesting.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. The left-hand path formula is dealing with the mechanics of the underlying phenomena of the spirit itself, despite the image that is happening. So it takes a sort of an affiliation with the nothingness beyond the practice. As long as I'm still thinking I'm down here and I'm calling something else to do good or bad. Now, is there a place to do that in the craft? Absolutely. You can have minor works to deploy, but the formula of holding the spirit, as long as it's not yours and you don't understand what it is, then you are in the same perceptual position. You have not exited to a non-karmic perceptual position when dealing with the metaphysics. And I know it sounds a little bit over each other, but the nature of the subject is of such elegance that also the system of dealing with it has to be as clever.
Right. So now, speaking of the jinn and Islam's role in Western occultism, it's been marginalized, and I think part of your work is to correct this. For instance, you have a project called the 1001 Forbidden Book Project, which I think is fascinating. And these are the books that really haven't been in circulation for hundreds, if not thousands of years in the Islamic world and in the world in general. Why is it that Islam has not been given its due in the occult world? In fact, even groups like the Golden Dawn, and they really are very dismissive of Islam. And like even you read geomancy is really an ancient Arabic Islamic form, and you read Stephen Skinner's book, and he barely mentions it. He starts it in the Middle Ages in the Latin, from the Latin. So what's your view on that?
I have to be very collected because I make a serious professional point here. And I hope some people are listening. First of all, we're savages. Look how I'm talking to you. Trying to be nice too. So we're viewed like that. Our way of talking is not nice to someone who is from a different part. The collapse of the ideology, the major difference is a philosophical view. that we say there is an absolute reality, whether you hit it or not. The modern world saying it's whatever you think it is. Depends. Mm-hmm. So there is a fundamental collide. Historically, this was very bloody in expressing itself over the Middle Ages in ways that left lots of European countries, Western countries, very worried about the reality of the Ottoman at the time or whatever showing at their courthouses. And of course, we're not saying who's right or wrong, but we're just saying the narrative of the Eastern adepts, whether you guys know it or not. I hope we're not going over time. I'll try to make it fast.
No, we're good. We're going to take some time for questions as well. So
okay. So anyways, to make this point, it's important. Eventually, the philosophy contribution of the Muslim was dismissed in favor of the Arabic interpretation of the Greek philosophy. Let me say this again. Very crucial point. Any educated person today, nice educated person, would say, yes, the Arabs and the Muslims did a great work in preserving the Greek work.
Right.
We believe that in itself is a very biased thing to happen, meaning choosing Ibn Rushd as the source of philosophy because he's the main interpreter of the Greek is technically saying all the other guys, we didn't do anything. We took west to west. So when you say Stephen Skinner say the grimoire tradition came from here, Greek, and bypassed the Islamic world, yes, I heard him say that. I'm not surprised because the narrative of the record on his shelf is flawed. And we need to make this point very clear. If I'm going to do anything in my lifetime, is going to make this beyond doubt clear. This narrative does not bypass the Islamic world. The Islamic world did not rehash the Greek philosophy and metaphysics, as did Ibn Rushd. As a matter of fact, the adept of the East critique is that the Western school choosing Ibn Rushd and dismissing Shirazi or Ibn Sina's philosophy to the favor of his medicine, or Mullah Sadra, or all these guys, in itself is very weary. So I believe eventually the record was biased in collecting that due to all these factors that ended up on the shelf of the true decent academic, modern academic, that never have seen field work in the last 4 decades, 3 decades. No field work. It's all something wrote this at least, and I'm being very generous. So the idea of rehashing the flawed narratives on the shelves left the genuine researcher rehashing these old bones. Not their mistake, but they still have an academic responsibility. So I think that's what happens. Your comment on Stephen Skinner, if you might, I want to say something. I heard a video myself a couple of times for the, of course, very well written all the time work when he mentioned that the grimoire tradition, I believe, some sort of magic bypassed the Islamic world. And I believe I'm rephrasing. And I was shocked to hear that. The mirroring reality that even just the fact that Sulaiman is Middle Eastern is in itself something that should have been looked at. The living tradition today, Rouhani tradition and magic tradition in the Middle East mirrors tens of what you guys have. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something humbly. What you guys have as a grimoire is normally a couple of pages or a chapter in one of our books. Humbly. So the idea that is inaccessible to the modern world, in my opinion, is what inspired me to say, you know what, I'm publishing 1001 Arabic title as is, and then put their manuscripts to anybody who wants to study or translate to have it on hand. So that is what I'm trying to do.
It's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, I really look forward to this. And already you have a number of different books on your site that are really hard to get, because I know I lived in the Middle East for a number of years, and trying to get a copy of Shams al Ma'arif
Yes.
is very, very difficult. And you're offering on your site. In fact, I will pick up a copy of that. I'm really
Yes.
excited about that.
Yes. We have 14 books out already.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's a great, great project. It's going to change a lot of the. What am I doing here? It's going to change a lot of misconceptions, I think, as well.
It will just give us a solid point of avoiding silly conversations, honestly.
Right.
So when we translate work, if someone say this is not, go and read the Arabic number this.
Right.
So we're having enough material published in Arabic as a backdrop to the work of translation we're going to put forward, inshallah.
Inshallah. And I having lived in Egypt for many years as well, and married into an Egyptian family, I mean, magic is part of the fabric there. I mean, you don't separate normal life from magic, and which I find very interesting. So we do have a question. We're going to go back to a little bit of the herbalism. We have a question from Akano.
Yeah,
Can incense be viewed as an entheogen in Sufi practice? Now, incense and your oils are very crucial. In fact, you have a Korean oil. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the oils.
Yes, absolutely.
Also, yeah.
If you excuse me, I'll grab some water if you don't mind.
Sure. And like I say, if anyone wants to come on and ask a question on camera, you're more than welcome. Just let me know and I'll bring you on.
I want to thank you for tolerating me. I know.
Oh, I love this. In fact, I got a little bit off topic. I know we're supposed to about entheogens, but it's just a fascinating.
That's the polychronic nature of our work, brother.
And like I say, I've been studying Sufism for a number of years, and I've been looking for a teacher such as yourself who has this broad knowledge, because not a lot of sheikhs have this, this broad knowledge of the whole metaphysics and the history, which is fascinating.
It's been mistaken with behavioral approach, unfortunately.
So, Akano, do you want to come on? Let's see if he's there still. Or we can start talking about that. So talk about the incense, how you make them.
Okay.
The magical practices behind that.
The incense or the fumes, al-abkhira wal-adkhina, al-ruhaniya, is a crucial thing. And if I told you how we do it, it is very complex. It takes over a year. We're going to be posting some videos, and the product hopefully will have enough to sell. Maybe in a month or so, we'll have finished our process. It's a distillation of many complex process that follows the khifi or khifat formula on the Ma'bad al-Fiyala temple in Egypt, ancient Egyptian, and it lacks an ingredient. And you're married in an Egyptian family. Even when we make coffee mix, we don't tell everybody what's the secret ingredient. Every family will give you the recipe without their own addition to the formula. So that is what's written on the Fiyala temple, and that is we call the body of the incense. There is another process for bringing the ruh, the soul of the different herbs and things bring in, and some of them are very powerful, psychoactive. Some of them use different ingredient that's like hashish. Like one of them use no different than what's in the Picatrix. Have cannabis. What is it called? That weed kind of sort of that.
Yeah, cannabis.
Some others have the dream herb that we mentioned earlier. Yes. Also, it's one of the major forming souls or ruh in the that kind of incense. So it is fascinating, and I claim it will be enough to move someone's perception. No different than our oils also are not just claims. We believe they are of a quality to make a perceptual movement in the operator's field.
And the oils, how do you use your oils? Because I know magical oils, all your oils are very specifically made as well, ritually made, we should say, right?
Yes. And we have a lot of information online about them. They all come in 3 milliliters bottles, beautiful like this. We have now the 1 millimeter tester, but this is the recommended one. There's many ways to use them. A powerful thing, let me show you right now. You hold it this way, you put it on this finger. So there is, you use it, it lasts a lot time, a lot. See, there's nothing. And then you nut it in a certain way like this.
Okay. Right. It's like you're anointing yourself.
So this is the simplest way.
Right.
And people now see it in some grimoires and stuff. There's also different anointing points in the body. Right. And each one of those is pinpointed to the kind of work that is described in its page on the website.
Right. Right. And you also use stones and rings in the system as well. So with each stone having a specific spiritual quality.
It's in our tradition, as you know, the Aqiq, Fayruz, Hadid Sini, Yaqut. So there is a few, 5 or 7 or 8 major stones that we believe have taken the covenant with us from the primordial time. Equally so, when the covenant came, many things came in the covenant. So some of these stones are very powerful allies, such as al-Aqiq. And so we have those, and we work with them traditionally. It's also one of the central power objects in our work, is at least the Aqiq ring.
Right.
One of the desired thing to be able to hold on your energy body in the way we work in with. Facilitates by the virtue if it's common.
And that was the ring that the Prophet, peace be upon him, wore. That was his, right? That was the stone that he wore as well, correct?
I believe so, yes. It was a round Aqiq Kabidi.
Right.
And you also, a quick note on stones. The modern world have the classification of stone based on its mineral composition, right?
Right.
So it have this much crystal, this, so it's agate, it have this, so it's fluorite or whatnot. The ancients, and in our tradition, we classify the stones on what we call a ruhani current. So that's why what we call aqiq now is presented as 7 or 8 different stones: carnelian, agate, moonstone, or whatnot, right? As such, so that is also something that's confusing to people from the modern world trying to deal with people from our traditions.
Right. So John wants to come on for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Why don't we bring him on? That'll be cool. One second. I just detached this somehow. Here we go. Here we go. Cool. And
I know
one of your elder students, right?
Yes,
I mean,
definitely.
He's the head of the inner order.
Yes, powerful.
And I interviewed him 2 weeks ago too. So
just beautiful interview. Thank you for sharing this with us all.
So we'll just bring him on. But yeah, now as far as the incenses, you are selling them now online. What incense would you suggest that people start out with? Starting on the path?
Ideally, it is very interesting. I have to show you. It's very similar to what you would have see in what you would imagine as a Chinese herbal medicine store. Meaning, ideally, when I cook and fix and distill my bukhur, I end up with 28 letters at least.
Right.
So each working, the capacity of what points and parts I put from the 28 is specified to that person and work.
Right.
To make it easier, we're presenting 7 different types. Each has to do with one of the regular spheres or one of the hot zones on the body. So
Right.
you'll have one for Monday, one for Sunday, one for the moon, one for this, and each one would have the energies of evocative nature to perception. They're designed
Right.
in a way that is hopefully will be felt also by the clients.
And also, just to clarify, when you say hot zones, that's essentially, I guess, in the West, we would know them as chakras, and they're movable. In your system, they move from different
Yeah,
points on the hand, the body, corresponding to the five.
seven.
When you pray, seven, right? Seven, and then when you're at rest, they line up.
Yes.
Right.
So that is
So,
the same really as observed because we're all observing a real phenomena. It might not be
right.
seen,
Mm-hmm.
but whether the Hindu or the Buddhist or the Muslim or the Viking have
Mm-hmm.
partaken shamanically or cathonically or geometrically in the gnosis, they will see realities. Oh, there's seven things happening, seven selves. Oh, there's this.
Right.
Some traditions have viewed them in more specification to their own practice, like we do. We're concerned
Right.
about how to circulate the breath to affect and imbue things. So our tradition explore that. Maybe the Hindu tradition explore more of the meridian system. As such, I would not be surprised. As I told you, we're all describing the same thing.
Hmm. Good. Well, I don't know. It looks like we don't have any other questions. If anyone has any questions, I can bring you online. But if not, we can. Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having.
I try to bring John on. Yeah, I said he wasn't able to get in. Sometimes Crowdcast is a little bit weird. Phoenix says, "Thank you, Phoenix." Yeah, well, thank you everyone for coming. I think I'd love to have you on again at some point as well. I think it was really, really sort of touched on some very interesting subjects.
Yes,
And
I
yeah,
really humbled that you had me. I want to say a final word on hashish, so I don't feel guilty. We left it. That
right.
it's a powerful ally when
Mm,
when you learn how to hold it in your body and utilize it in your life and spiritual work. And I would claim that our order or the ages have refined the proper ways of using it in a spiritual way that's beneficial for the practitioner.
right. And when you say hold it in your body, you mean putting it in a certain you
Like,
call it
like
hot zone.
example, like for example,
Mm,
when you smoke hashish or weed, you
mm,
sometimes feel the activity more up here. For to simplify it,
right. Mm,
activity here, so that automatically brings about some paranoia or whatnot. But
right.
that happens because the overactivity in the energy is in that center.
Right.
When you ally the soul, the ruh of
Mm,
the plant, and refine
mm,
its resonance in resin, it
mm-hmm,
you can hold it at lower centers
right.
or
Mm-hmm,
divert it to different centers that will not have the effect, will be most useful in the
mm-hmm,
way that produces perceptual movements.
right.
So that's what I mean by holding it in different parts.
Mm. Bring it down into a different hot
Mhm.
zone.
Mhm.
Beautiful. That's great. Excellent. Well, Shoei, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you,
Assalamu
brother.
alaikum. Masalama.
Alaikum
We'll
salam. It's been
chat
a
soon.
pleasure and hope to
Okay.
see you guys soon. Salam
Excellent. Good
alaikum.
everyone. Alaikum salam. Bye bye.